am come hither to die," Anne Boleyn began, on the morning of May 19th, 1536. Those were her first words atop the scaffold erected within the Tower of London. But what few realise is that this carefully measured speech, delivered with grace and startling composure, was not the one she had planned to give. Anne Boleyn, the second wife of King Henry VIII and the first English queen to be executed, was accused of adultery, incest and high treason. The charges were, according to nearly all modern historians and several of her contemporaries, politically motivated and grossly fabricated. Yet, as she stood before the small crowd gathered inside the tower's walls, Anne did not protest her innocence. Her final address was restrained, praising the king, a gentle and sovereign lord, and asking those present to pray for her soul. But this was not due to cowardice or guilt. Anne Boleyn had in fact prepared a very different scaffold speech, one that addressed her wrongful imprisonment and emphasized her unwavering faith and innocence. She was not allowed to give it. Tudor protocol demanded that condemned prisoners make no public statements that might inflame popular sentiment or cast doubt on the monarch's judgment. William Kingston, Constable of the Tower, recorded Anne's mental clarity in her final days, writing to Secretary Thomas Cromwell. "This morning she sent for me. She said she would like to have some word to speak, but would not offend His Grace." It is clear Anne understood she was being watched and controlled even in her last moments. The scaffold was not a stage for justice, it was an instrument of control. Her silence, or rather her silencing, reveals the extent to which her execution was not only a punishment, but a calculated performance for legitimacy. Henry VIII required not only Anne's death, but her compliance in it. Anne Boleyn's final moments were choreographed to serve the crown's image. The truth of her thoughts, likely censored by court officials, remains buried beneath a composed performance. What she wasn't allowed to say may echo louder through history than what she did. The French executioner, a foreign blade for an English queen. Why would an English king summon a foreign executioner to behead his queen? Anne Boleyn's execution on May 19th, 1536, marked a rare moment in English history, not only for the unprecedented fall of a sitting queen, but for the presence of a foreign swordsman at her death. Instead of the traditional English axe, Henry VIII arranged for a French-style execution by sword. This decision was not made out of mercy alone. It was symbolic, calculated, and deeply political. The executioner, whose name is not recorded in official documents but is often identified in sources as Jean Rambaud, was summoned from Calais, then under English control. He was known as a master swordsman, trained in the swift, precise method of decapitation by sword, a method used in France for noble executions. Henry VIII's choice to bring him to London was extraordinary. In Tudor England, beheadings were typically carried out by axe, and many were gruesome. The axe was neither swift nor clean. Botched executions were not uncommon. The choice of the sword carried a deliberate message. Henry wished to portray Anne's death as dignified, almost elegant, at least on the surface. But beneath that veneer was cold strategy. Anne had been accused of adultery with 5 men, including her own brother. She had been condemned as a traitor. Yet by choosing the sword, Henry could distance himself from the brutality and suggest magnanimity. He could appear merciful, even as he ordered the death of the woman for whom he had once torn apart an entire church. Contemporary accounts suggest Anne was aware of the unusual arrangement. According to Sir William Kingston, the Constable of the Tower, Anne Boleyn remarked before her execution, "I heard say the executioner was very good and I have a little neck." Her words, tinged with gallows humour, show her acute awareness of the drama being staged around her. It is also recorded that when she knelt at the scaffold, she looked about nervously and asked, "Shall I say my prayers now?" Perhaps unsure when the final blow would fall. The executioner himself was paid handsomely. According to royal records, he received £23 6 days, a considerable sum, more than many nobles earned in a year. He had been practicing in the Tower's courtyard days before the execution, honing his strike for precision. The presence of a French executioner was not merely an act of mercy. It was a symbolic gesture meant to sanitize the image of Anne Boleyn's death. It cloaked a political assassination in the guise of refinement, and though the blade was foreign, The motives were unmistakably English. The execution day, the swift yet calculated end of a queen. The sun rose early on May 19th, 1536, over the Tower of London, casting a pale light across the green lawn just north of the White Tower. Anne Boleyn, Queen of England, had spent her final hours in the Queen's lodgings, once richly adorned, now cold and silent. She had risen before dawn, confessed her sins, taken the sacrament, and waited. The execution had been delayed once already. On May 18th, Anne had prepared herself for death, only to be told it was postponed. Sources like Sir William Kingston, Constable of the Tower, recorded her agitation and anxiety, noting that she looked to be dead by noon. When no messenger came, she broke into nervous laughter. The delay was psychological cruelty, not logistical necessity. Every hour extended the tension, magnifying the spectacle. Shortly before 9 a.m. on May 19th, Anne was escorted to the scaffold within the tower's inner ward. She wore a grey damask gown over a crimson kirtle, the red symbolic of martyrdom in the Catholic tradition. Her headdress was simple, her hair tied back to expose her neck. Around her gathered a small, select group, nobles, officials, and a few citizens. The public had been kept at a distance. This was not meant to be a chaotic scene, but a controlled execution of a queen. She ascended the scaffold with composure. Eyewitness accounts describe her poise and the resigned dignity in her movements. She addressed the crowd calmly. "Good Christian people, I am come hither to die, for according to the law and by the law I am judged to die. I pray God save the king and send him long to reign over you, for a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never." Notably, she made no protest of innocence. But this was expected. Condemned traitors were expected to submit humbly. Publicly asserting her innocence could have been seen as a final act of defiance. She then knelt, blindfolded herself, and prayed, "To Jesus Christ I commend my soul. Lord Jesus, receive my soul." Her ladies wept quietly nearby. The executioner, sword concealed behind him, moved into position. According to chronicler Lancelot de Carle, the French swordsman called out to an assistant for the blade. As Anne turned her head instinctively, the executioner stepped forward and carried out the sentence. No sound followed but the rustling of clothing and muffled sobs. Anne Boleyn died in under 45 seconds. Her remains were placed in an empty arrow chest and buried in the nearby chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula. No official ceremony, no royal procession, just silence and haste. Her execution was carried out with chilling precision, not as an act of justice, but as a political ritual. Every detail of the day was managed, timed, and orchestrated for effect. The Queen's end was swift, but never merciful. It was calculated. Anne Boleyn's execution was more than a royal downfall. It revealed how fear sharpens power's blade. In striking one life, Henry VIII reforged the monarchy and showed that even crowns fracture when ambition eclipses conscience. History warns that no rank guarantees mercy when statecraft demands sacrifice to this day. Her fate reminds us that the line between glory and doom can be severed in a single stroke. Does her calm acceptance testify to inner grace or calculated necessity? Comment below with your view. As witnesses noted, she whispered, "To Jesus Christ I commend my soul. Lord Jesus, receive my soul."